I can very much relate to how a mayor feels, having been mayor, and noticed that when we had disasters in our community, there were two kinds of people who showed up. People who were there because they had a specific role to play, job to do, and difference to make and wanted to help, and people who were there because they wanted to look good. There's two kinds of people who show up when you have that kind of disaster experience. People who are there because they have a specific job to do and are there to get something done, and people who are there to look good and have their picture taken. There's two kinds of people who show up when there's a disaster. The folks who are there with a specific job to do and with action that's going to make a difference, and then folks who want to look good.
Secretary, what do you have to say? Hi, how are you?
Good.
Jenny here at the Daily Caller News Foundation. What do you have to say to the folks in Ohio, East Palestine, who are suffering right now?
Well, I'd refer you to about a dozen interviews I've given today, and if you'd like to arrange a conversation, be sure to reach out to our press office, but I'm not going to have that conversation with you. Just walking down the street.
You don't have a message for them?
I do, and I shared it with the press many times today. I'd refer you to those comments.
Would you mind sharing it with us?
No, I'm going to refer you to the comments that I made to the press because right now I'm taking some personal time and I'm walking down the street.
Are you going down there?
What's that?
Are you going down there at all?
Yeah, I am.
When are you going?
I'll share that when I'm ready.
Okay,
not talking on the
thank
street. Can I get a photo of you?
Yeah.
Former President Trump will be heading there. What are your thoughts on that?
I'll just say this. You know, one thing I learned early on in my time as a mayor dealing with a lot of disasters is that there's two kinds of people who show up when there's a disaster. The folks who are there with a specific job to do and with action that's going to make a difference, and then folks who want to look good. And I'll let people make their own decisions.
So I'll follow that up with asking, will you be heading there?
I am planning to come. I've been careful to respect the independent role of the NTSB and stay out of their way. But we're now entering the phase where it's about policy. It's about what my department does, which is ensuring that there's a high standard for these railroad companies. And I think an important part of that process is to be with the residents of East Palestine, to hear their stories, and to talk about the action that we're taking right now.
When are you going to go to East Palestine?
Well, I am planning to go, and our folks were on the ground from the first hours. I do want to stress that the NTSB needs to be able to do its work independently. But when I go, the focus is going to be on action. Look, I was mayor of my hometown for 8 years. We dealt with a lot of disasters, natural and human. And one of the things I noticed very quickly is that there's two kinds of people who show up when you have that kind of disaster experience. People who are there because they have a specific job to do and are there to get something done, and people who are there to look good and have their picture taken. When I go, it will be about action on rail safety, like the actions that we are calling on Congress to help us with, that we're calling on industry to take, and that we are undertaking ourselves as a department to help make sure that these kinds of things don't happen in the future.
So I want to ask you, the residents of East Palestine are asking when you are going to pay them a visit. What have you got to say to them?
So I am planning to visit. I have followed the norm in the first days of the crash response of staying out of the way of the independent NTSB. The National Transportation Safety Board has the lead on the investigative part. But we're now entering the phase where this is becoming a policy conversation. So in addition to being ready to take enforcement action against Norfolk Southern to the extent that the investigation turns up any violations, it is also time for us to move forward from a policy perspective. Make sure that we strengthen accountability and strengthen rules on rail safety.
I have to ask you, I'm here in Kyiv, Ukraine, and one of the things the mayor of East Palestine said that he called on President Biden to visit East Palestine before he went to Ukraine. He said that was the biggest slap in the face that tells you right now he doesn't care about us, talking about President Biden. So he can send every agency he wants to, but I found out this morning that, and one of the briefings, that he was in the Ukraine giving millions of dollars away to people over there, not to us, and I'm furious. Look, to Americans who have a train derailment, particularly with hazardous chemicals in their community, you can see why this feels like the biggest priority for them and perhaps 2 generations to follow if there's hazardous chemicals out there. What do you say to people who see the president's visit to Ukraine but don't see you or the president in East Palestine?
Well, the biggest thing I want residents of East Palestine to know is that they're not alone. Our department's personnel were on the ground from within the first hours of the incident. They've got multiple federal agencies on the ground, partnering with the state, partnering with local first responders. And this has the attention of the entire administration and will for many years to come. Look, the people of East Palestine deserve accountability from Norfolk Southern. That's something that the EPA announced today, the level that they're holding Norfolk Southern to. It's something that we're going to pursue to the maximum extent allowed by law. And I'll tell you, I am planning to go, and when I'm on the ground, it's going to be about action. It's not going to be about show or politics, because I can very much relate to how a mayor feels, having been mayor, and noticed that when we had disasters in our community, there were two kinds of people who showed up. People who were there because they had a specific role to play, job to do, and difference to make and wanted to help, and people who were there because they wanted to look good. This administration has been on the ground from day one, and that support for East Palestine will not go away.
Wow.
Look at all that.
Look at it.
It's all in the bottom of the creek bed. Now look at it. But they burned all the chemicals off of there, right?
That's what I heard, yeah.
Maybe off the top.
Can I get a photo of you?
Yeah.
It's had its challenges.
Right.
I mean, if you look at what the American transportation systems have faced in the last 2 or 3 years, partly because of the pandemic, we've faced issues from container shipping to airline cancellations. Mm-hmm. Now we got balloons.
That's right.
Full of hot air. Adjective. 1. Idiomatic, talking a lot, especially without saying anything of value or meaning. For example, did the salesman tell you anything new, or was he just full of hot air?